the 7Bs are so ridiculously expensive.
About 300 a piece currently, unless I'm wrong.
I think they might actually be closer to four,
Oh
like
man, yeah, you're
399.
right. Yep, yep.
Podcasting,
But
who'd
they're
have
worth it
thought?
though. Keeps everything warm.
Yes, those are a little too soft when I'm in here screaming around.
No, I know what you mean. There's certain things it just doesn't catch.
We good, Andy? We up on this?
Oh, we live.
So we were talking a little bit about yours, the Hip Hop Humboldt podcast.
Yeah.
What was the goal with starting that? Was it just to get involved in the community there, to try to provide a voice for the community? What were you thinking?
You know, it's really interesting. It started as one thing and then morphed into something else as I saw kind of the need and the interest. I was at first just doing it, doing something that I was doing years ago, which was just letting people know about new hip hop releases. And that's mainstream releases, not even just like Humboldt hip hop, right? And I've just been doing that for years and years, letting my friends know what's popping, what's new, in hip hop. And about a year ago is when I said I want to make that leap to start to, archive some of this again, and in one of the main guys, rest in peace, Reggie Osei, that's Combat Jack. He had probably the first biggest hip hop podcast, the Combat Jack Show, and he passed of colon cancer some years ago. And it really, it started to move my mind again about archiving, just all this, different hip hop that I let my friends know about. And so, like I said, about a year ago, finally just hopped into it, was letting my friends know about, mainstream hip hop, like I said. And then some local people kind of started to see what I was doing and let me know, like, hey, we were doing like, ciphers out here, like local rappers and stuff like that, and we, don't have a hip hop blogger around here, and we kind of need that, you know what I mean? And I was like, well, I'm already doing this podcast talking about mainstream hip hop. Why not also include, local artists, and start to collaborate with the community. And from there, I got, just I want to say like a cosign, but I don't want to say that, but like kind of like a cosign from a few local artists and musicians that were like, this is a good idea. We've been wanting to do this, so let's support this. One of the first guests that I had on my podcast was Brian Swislow, who's a local musician. He's been doing music around here for a long time. He was with the funk band named Spank years ago. Then he was also with Subliminal Sabotage, which was a really big band years back out of Southern Humboldt. He's been doing the Swislow's Mystery Lounge for years now, and currently he's with Object Heavy, keyboardist for Object Heavy. And he got on the podcast and just kind of laid down the framework of this is the scene that's been going on around here for like, over 20 years. And that episode was really cool, just to kind of get it from somebody who's been that immersed in, he spends a lot of his time just, getting things done out in the community on a musical front, like with making music, managing the bands, booking gigs and things like that. So he's seen things firsthand, and to get it from him on the podcast was a real blessing for me. You know what I mean? And from there, a bunch of other artists found out, and they're like, okay, so we need to be on this too, And that was earlier this year, and now here we are in September, and I've had about 13 guests or so. I've got about 3 episodes, in the queue ready to come out. But it's been a blast. I've been really stoked to just hear all these stories from the local artists about this really like vibrant scene that's been going on. I feel like, and not to sidetrack off onto this point, but I feel like there's not enough media around here in Humboldt County, and definitely feel like hip hop has not gotten its due share of media exposure in Humboldt County for various reasons. Yeah, so I'm just happy to support the community. Hip hop is something that I've just had a passion for my entire life. I grew up in Los Angeles, and I've been listening to hip hop since I was, living in the Wilshire district down there. And to be able to support the community just by doing this podcast is something that I'm just thankful that the community's taken to it. Like I said, the artists have, more artists want to be on here now. Like they're like, okay, we want to be on this thing. We want to, and that's what it was for. It was to get everybody, some spotlight. You know what I mean, and get their, their name out there, a little bit of their craft out there. So. But that's generally how it's gone, and it's been a blast. I've been really stoked. I know that you've been doing this for a while. I'm sure that you're stoked. It's just kind of a good feeling to let some voices be heard. At least for me, that's how I kind of see it, as me just helping that exposure happen. And I'm going to be here to continue to support the hip hop community in as many ways as I can. I go out to the Fat Bowl ciphers that happen typically about twice a month, usually over at Fat Bowl in Arcata, the Fat Bowl clothing store, and then there's one that happens at the Epitome Gallery. And yeah, they're really great times because the artists just come out. It's an open mic. You can just come out and just spit your bars, and with as many hip hop artists as there are around here, you wouldn't realize it until you actually go to one of these things, because they come out and you'll have like a good 10 different MCs spitting on the mic, and it's pretty cool. You know what I mean? So yeah, I've had a great time with it. Made a lot of connections over the past few months, and I hope to continue to grow it by getting more artists on, and getting their stories out there, and because there's a lot. That's one of the things too that I know I'm, live and this is recorded, and that's totally fine by me. I almost want to say this to the community. I don't want anybody to get mad about the order, because at first I was trying to really get some legends on. I had Brian Swislow on there. I had Knack One, who's been doing, holding down multiple pillars of hip hop in Humboldt County for, a long time. He's been doing these Fat Bowl ciphers for a long time. He does graph work down in the Bay Area. And, he comes out to these Fat Bowl ciphers. They create a good experience at the Fat Bowl ciphers, and I want to encourage anybody to come out to those things. And also, there's another cipher that goes down weekly. It's called the Insight Cipher. That's just another spot for MCs to come out and showcase their talents. Practice. Spitting. And I've been to that as well. It's a good time. There's dope dudes that and women too, that go down there and sing and rap. And so it's a really cool time. You would be surprised how many hip hop artists are doing music around here.
Well, that's the key, right? I was gonna bring that up to you. Is I didn't even realize the hip hop scene was that big in Humboldt, let alone in Eureka.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so, touching on what you said with drawing that spotlight onto these people, I think that's important.
Yeah, indeed. I think that the media outlets that have existed, I think it's really dependent on, the staff of those outlets to really kind of be interested in things. Like we've seen, for instance, Bob Doran. He's done a lot of coverage over the years of the hip hop scene from, he did a piece, he's done a lot of different written articles in local news, but he did a piece where he was spotlighting local graph work, some of the graph work that was back in the Devil's Playground.
Before they tore it down.
That was kind of a spot where people would go out there and do a lot of graph work. You know what I mean? And some interesting stuff out there. And he went out there and spotlighted it. So, but he has some interest. He has interest in music, in hip hop, in giving the scene some exposure. You know what I mean? But it really, if you're on a team, I'm just, I'm not trying to say anybody in specific, but there's only so many media outlets around here, right? There's, in terms of web outlets, there's the Lost Coast Outpost and there's the Redheaded Black Belt, I would say. There's smaller sites, you know what I mean, that drop maybe more tailored news and things like that, but those are the main go-tos. And I mean, other than just kind of letting people know what might be happening with larger events, there's not that much exposure for hip hop on those outlets. And so, again, that's why I'm glad that I'm doing what I'm doing. And that's why I'm glad that I was just on a local radio show on HumboldtHotAir.org. Assad from Rude Entertainment is doing a every other Friday radio show. And that's just another platform for hip hop artists to come out and get some exposure, So if we can continue that kind of thing in Humboldt County to just help artists get that exposure, let artists know that they can get exposure by coming out to the Fat Bowl ciphers, that will, bring some of those elements out of the woodwork, which is kind of why it's hard to see everything because, artists around here or just anywhere, their craft is very important to them. And so, I think that it can be hard sometimes to just put it out in the public. And, I think I've seen a lot of different people that are, you don't know how people are going to respond to it and everything. And then you have the people that are really confident too. The artists that have been doing it, the legends, and, but you got the whole gamut of it in Humboldt County, from people just starting to the legends and anywhere and everywhere in between. You've got different confidence levels with their craft, just like any other art form. And so, if we can just, continue to increase that exposure, hopefully people get the chances to get out there and be more confident once they've got that experience,
Is that what holds a lot of people back? Is the fear of getting up and actually rapping or singing in front of a crowd of people?
As me not being, I do spit bars, and I've always kind of spit bars since high school, but I don't consider myself an artist by any means. So I couldn't, I couldn't speak to that, but I do definitely think that that is a thing.
And I would imagine, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting because, with kind of the limited amount of exposure of hip hop around here in the media, it lends to something that hip hop artists, a local hip hop artist, said on on a podcast. The local hip hop artist Highway, living legend right there. Highway. He's been doing music for a long time. Collaborates with everybody. He's a really dope dude. He was just like, there's people in Humboldt County that feel like hip hop shouldn't be here. So I think that lends to it being harder for artists to want to expose their art out there. You know what I mean? When the general tone is, it's not super conducive of hip hop if hip hop isn't getting the due exposure. Is something that I would just kind of say. And so, that would lend to artists, being a little bit more, careful with how they put themselves out there, with what art they're putting themselves out there or with, and but on the flip side, you do come out to these Fat Bowl ciphers, and there's artists that will just like go in politically. You know what I mean? And a lot of times, like as an artist, especially maybe a hip hop artist or just an artist in general, you might want to stay away. Some people say stay away from politics because you're cutting your fan base and things like that. It may be harder for you to come up. But some people just go to those Fat Bowl ciphers and just go off on presidents and all. It's a fun time. It's great because you get that chance to just go and, if you've had those thoughts and ideas in your head and you're a writer, a wordsmith, you can get it out there, So I really enjoy helping and supporting the community thrive on any level, especially this exposure level.
Do you think that's still I shouldn't say predominant, but still a strong view that hip hop shouldn't be out there? Or shouldn't be here in the area?
I wouldn't, I would say that I already said my piece on it. I would let the community speak for itself. And that being, like I said, that there's just not a whole lot of exposure that prior to, my doing this podcast and Assad's radio show, like I said, which he started in the last few months, like there was no dedicated outlet to hip hop. Years ago, there was a hip hop radio show on local radio. And I know one of the DJs was Damien from the Dirty Rats. He was on there DJing, and that was cool. I think that was back around the like 2003, 2004 kind of group of years right there. That's when I first moved up here to Humboldt from the Mojave Desert is where I was living right before moving up here. And
that's a pretty big change.
It was. I was glad to get away from that heat and come up here to where, surfers, on one side of the school and the other side of the school is the forest, you know what I mean? And the trees, like the trees, we're smoking right now, you know what I mean? Yeah, when I first came up here, I think it was called The Party, and it was a dope radio show, and I came up here and it existed, and so I'm like, okay, so hip hop like is around here, and there's shows, and stuff like that, and then that went away, and I mean, I may be wrong. There may have been some shorter lived shows or something like on the radio, local radio, but I just honestly can't think of any dedicated like show to hip hop around here since the party was going like at the at the turn of the millennium around there. So with that being said, um, I can't say in specific like whether it's just not enough money getting put into the scene. You know what I mean? I really honestly feel like there's a lot of art that happens in Humboldt County, and there's so much money that gets put into art, and only so much is going like hip hop is a slice, you know. And so, it's going to pan out each year. People are going to spend how much they're going to spend on hip hop. There's going to be so many shows each year for hip hop. But I mean, I talk to artists around here, young artists that are hungry, and they're like, we want some more shows. And I mean, I don't have right now necessarily the capability to like fully support that. I'm just trying to get my podcast,
Yeah, right. You
rolling.
can't really start up a whole studio right now. It'd
Yeah,
be a process.
exactly. Or even just like, the money involved with putting money down on like a show, that costs money. And it's hard to run shows nowadays. You really got to market things really well, which is something that, to move kind of that idea of hip hop have not getting its proper shine around here, to move that idea to something else, in that it's hard to market around here, whether it's hip hop shows or I've been involved with like local, community building events and groups and things like that. And it's just hard to like get people out to events, especially since the pandemic, started. And if you don't market things properly, you're going to fall on your face. And I've seen it happen. And I try to tell people that I know that are, involved with different things, like, let people know about a show 2 months ahead of time. Make another push a month before. If you can put another push like 2 weeks before, and then write the few days of, like, you got to spend social media money on that. Social media ads like make a big difference around here because there's nobody doing them. Like I do my ads, and then my people are like, yeah, like your ad is like slamming my feed every time I'm on Instagram, because there's like nobody else paying for ads. It's just like the few events that happen, and like maybe a few dozen companies. So it's a kind of an open landscape to where if hip hop event producers were marketing things better and had a much better understanding of what the clip is that you have to run at to properly market events, you would make sure that heads would turn out. But I say that, and that's also fighting against the tide of, we just had the president say that the pandemic is over. I'm not going to speak to that one way or another, because I still think it's out there, you know what I mean? And there's still people dying from it. But
no, we're done. COVID's over now.
I know, right?
Biden came out and said that.
I know, right?
We've been done. COVID, it's like a week. It was a week-long event.
I know, right? And so, it's hard getting people out to events just for that.
I think it's hard. Promoting is hard just in general. I mean, yeah, here we are isolated as well, but just running ads, doing all that is just hard in general to hit your audience. I've been thinking about running ads for this podcast. Do you for yours?
Yeah.
You push them out there?
Yep.
Have you noticed success with that?
Yeah, I have. And I'll tell you, my scheme is, and I'm just, I'm new to this, and I'm even willing to drop. That's one of the things. I drop all my creative ideas like on, my Instagram. So if you're on there, like keep an eye on my stories and stuff, because I drop like any good tips for social media. I follow a lot of like social media content, like manager type people, like they drop all the ideas, and so I'll put that in my stories on Instagram. So like, I think that it's, for me, I just put $30 per episode into my social media and boosting a post. I'll make the post that's got the podcast cover on it and boost that post, $30 a podcast, and that's me, contributing to the hip hop artist that was on the podcast, and then also trying to grow my brand as well, and I've noticed that I do get more profile, visits and follows, and it's definitely pushing it out there more so than if I'm just posting without boosting it, You know, I'm only hitting my followers. But that way, if I boost it for $30, I'm typically hitting like 6,000 people, you know, over like 4 or 5 days. And so that's not too bad. I mean, like I said, when my friends and other people in the community are like, yeah, we're seeing that stuff, like we're seeing it, you know, that's positive. I hear that and I'm thinking it's working. Even just $30 an episode, you know. So I don't know. If I had more money, I'd put more money into it. You know what I mean? But yeah, that's just my general like plan. I'm hoping to with the whole social media thing. I'm at this interesting crossroads with it, and it kind of goes back to I've had conversations with the artists on the podcast. Some artists are like, we want to have the scarcity element with social media. We don't want to just put posts out there every single day, you know, because you saturate. You know what I mean? Is at least a thought. And then I've got other people that are like the exact opposite. They're like, no, no, like if you can't spend 5 minutes a day to just make a quick reel, like a 7-second reel, or you know, for TikTok, and then repost that to Instagram, and then repost that to YouTube. You know what I mean? If you can't take 5 minutes for that a day to grow your brand, like you're not even invested in it. And I'm just like, man. And so it's just this interesting thing of people are on different pages with how to represent yourself, like, you know, on social media and stuff like that. And so I'm always trying to find that ebb and flow. What really gets me is I got, you know, a busy job and 2 kids. And so,
You're a
you know,
busy guy.
if I didn't have, you know, maybe my 2 kids, then I'd probably have more time to, you know, easily do that and drop consistently. And when you drop consistently, I think, you know, because you've seen and you've been dropping, like I've seen your shorts now, you drop pretty much like every day. It helps that you stay in the algorithm. You know, when you fall off, you fall out of the algorithm.
It's the momentum aspect. It's so huge.
Mm-hmm.
Even just posting regular content or posting your episodes weekly or bi-weekly is huge.
Mm-hmm.
People can expect, okay, I know on Tuesday an episode's going to drop, or okay, I know Friday I'm going to get a short, or this or that. It helps.
The
And people
schedule.
expect it.
Yep, it definitely helps. That way they can associate your brand with some kind of structure. You know, I've had it. You know, I've just between busyness and life and everything like that. I've not been as consistent as I've wanted to be. The goal was to be dropping 2 a month. And it's I think in the last 2 months I've only dropped 2 total. But I mean, you know, a few months back I got COVID. You know, it happens, and you know, things happen. You know what I mean? And but I'm still out there, you know, editing and you know dropping as often as I can. And like I said, I've got 3 ready to go here. Well, not ready to go, but I need to edit them, and then they'll be ready to go. One with local artist Droop Capone. Dope hip hop MC. He's been doing it for a while. He's from LA, and that was a cool episode because him and I, you know, we're both from LA, so we're talking about LA on there. So it gives kind of a different vibe than the hip hop artists that are repping Humboldt. You know what I mean? Just a little bit different energy, you know. Then I got an episode with Rough Ian and Alexander the Great.
And these are all local guys?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know I really didn't know that community was that big.
You know, I'm kind of with you. Like I said, I've lived here since 2004. I moved up here January of 2004, and I didn't know either till the last few years. You know, I think you really have to kind of that lends back to that, you know, the exposure thing. You know, like it's hard to get exposure around here potentially, or just you have to be interested in the niche and then go find it. You know, I think that's more what it is with so many different niches. Like I said, with so much art. You know?
Yeah, there's a surplus of every kind of content. Whatever you want, you can get it nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
It's just there for you.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe it. I'm just in the hip hop, and you know, I every now and then just do some just DJing at home, just personal hobbyist level, and I look at like, I'll move over to like the EDM category, and I'm like, oh my god, there's thousands upon thousands of artists, and I've heard of none of them, you know. But you talk to an EDM DJ, and they're like on it, you know. They know those lists like solid, you know. So it's all about the niches that you're into, you know.
Well, I think you found the perfect niche. I think you're in that spot where you could make something happen with it, you know, because it is still a little underground in the aspect of trying to get people to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can be here and shine this light on it And even if, like you said, you're throwing $30 at it, it has the added benefit it's blowing you up and it's blowing up that artist. It's
Mm-hmm.
killing two birds with one stone.
Yep. Yep. And another kind of goal with it all for doing the podcast was, with Humboldt State becoming Cal Poly Humboldt, it's now and going to continue to bring more and more students up here. That's a whole different story, right? That they're kind of packing Arcata with a lot of students. But separate from that, that brings more people up here. Hopefully, people that are interested in hip hop that will try to find more information about that niche and come out to the Fat Bowl ciphers and come out to the shows and I kind of wanted there to be an archival of all the artists for when people come here, like to be able to find it out quickly. Like this is a list on this podcast. I mean, just go on Spotify and search Hip Hop Humboldt, and then you've got the list of the artists that have been interviewed. And yeah, again, I don't want anybody to be mad about the order. I don't want any because there's artists that I think just for instance, like there's a group called Potluck. Dope hip hop artists.
Andy's over here shaking his head.
Yeah. Heck yeah, they've been doing it for a long time, and I'm trying to get them on the podcast. They're yet to come on,
You can pull the. Oh, we probably won't be able to play it, but you can pull it up.
I can't type.
Some Potluck.
Potluck. Sorry.
Oh, you're good.
How many local groups do you think there are, or just individuals?
Man, there's probably well over 150, and I'm just kind of thinking about the people that I know. I want to say over 150, if not more. What's really cool is that years ago, the owner of the Epitome Gallery, Julia Finkelstein, worked with Brian Swislow to create this cool, I think it was like, I don't think they call it specifically the Tree of Life, but it was this beautiful tree that she painted and inscribed like all the hip hop artists around here. And I mean, just if I'm just like thinking about remembering that image, like, I mean, it could be way more than 150. It probably is. Like, I want to bet some of the artists who are looking at me right now, like, bro, you're forgetting everybody. Like there's like everybody.
That's no small group though. 150 people is a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's just, I know a lot of people and they're just busy with the craft. It's, that social media thing, not everybody's with that. Not everybody's into it. It doesn't like myself. I'm not like into social media. It's kind of a, double-edged sword for me. You know what I mean? I actually generally dislike it and the idea of it. I like connecting with people, but what social media has become, I'm not into that. More of it. I feel it's more of a distraction, and
it's a time suck.
It definitely is, and they want it to be that way. It's its own economy now. The attention economy, and so I'm not into it, but I still got to do it because I got a brand that I'm trying to promote and trying to run. And but artists, they're artists and they're vested in their craft, and some people are just not into that social media thing, and so then it becomes really hard to get any exposure because like we were just talking about that when I was just recording, I think it was a couple of days ago with local band City Hippie, young local band, dope dudes. They were just like, if you don't stay consistent, then you fall off the algorithm, and then like if you stay off and you don't post, like it's like you don't exist. You know what I mean? And so it's this interesting thing where I think a lot of artists are just busy with their craft. They will drop their music, but that social media element may not be what they're, wanting to spend their time on. And so that exposure doesn't exist. And they, all that great art that's happening out there may just kind of be harder to access until you maybe go to shows. Shows do happen around here, and that's where some of the artists that I think don't do, that don't heavily invest in that social media game, they still go out to the shows and they do shows. So you got to keep your eye out for the shows is what you got to do.
How often are there shows around here?
I want to say about every month, but in the time of during and I don't want to say post-pandemic, but in these times it's been a lot slimmer. I want to say it's more like once every 2 months, but
is this one show every 2 months?
I think there was definitely periods of time where there was only like one show for like a 2 month time period for sure. But then there'll be like a month like June where there's like a bunch of hip hop shows. Like there'll be artists that come from outside the area, like big artists, mainstream artists, and they come and local artists like open and they're on the bill as well. You know what I mean? So that's a great way for local artists to get some exposure, and they'll try to do that because they want to get on those bills. They're like, I just saw B.O.B. and that was a City Hippie just opening for them. You know what I mean? And that was dope for them to be able to perform on that same stage as B.O.B. They were I was there at the show, and it was a dope show. They did a great job. It's just cool to see all of that. The artists get that kind of exposure where they're doing shows because you got to try to do that. You got to have somebody that's working on your side to make that happen. Like I said, Brian Swislow, like makes things happen, and he, will put the calls in. And, a lot of artists just don't know who to call. They don't know how to get on those bills, There's all kinds of hurdles that exist, you know what I mean, with even getting that limited exposure that, that's out there. So, I hope things continue to go in a different direction for hip hop in Humboldt County with more exposure, more artists being willing to go out there and get their craft out there. We got some cool shows coming up. We got a Back to Business 5.0 show, and I can't remember right off the top of my head, but I mean, we've got Two Tank, Highways on that show, Travie Bands, Hyphy Hefner, DJ Static's gonna be there. And a couple other artists, Marciano the Magnificent, and a couple others as well. That's going to be a dope show. That's at the Siren Song. The barriers to entry are very low as a fan because the shows are inexpensive. Like you don't have to go out and pay like $40 for a ticket. You want to go to the Siren Song and see that show, I think it's either $5 or $10. You know what I mean? It may be a little bit more than that, but anything 20 or less is inexpensive to go out and support multiple hip hop artists that are performing. Like that's inexpensive, So that's one show. Then there's the Oktoberfest that's happening. Booty Shaking Music is doing that. That's Scarab, dope hip hop MC, is gonna be. He comes here quite often. He's gonna be coming back. There's gonna be a bunch of local hip hop artists doing dope work on that show. Knack One, Eli Fowler, Flo J is gonna be on that show with Brian Swislow and his Mystery Lounge. That's one of the coolest events right there is when you get Brian Swislow and his Mystery Lounge, because they're just like off the cuff doing funk music and riffs for the hip hop artists who are then just dropping bars, whether it's off the dome or even maybe some written work, but it just comes together and it's like this killer show. Because that just sounds dope to me, like a funk band doing funky music and then hip hop artists like spitting on top of that. That sounds cool to me. Maybe that's just me. I don't know, but yeah, so that's coming up. So those shows are coming up. Shows do happen out there. I definitely don't want to forget about anybody, or if there are groups out there that are doing shows, maybe that I don't even know. Maybe I don't know about them. You know what I mean? I don't go to everything that's happening like in Sohum. There's a scene in Sohum, and there's a lot of performances that happen at the Stone Bar and Junction Grill. Stone Junction Bar and Grill. I mean. And so, yeah, it's just a big, beautiful scene. And I'm trying my best to stay on top of it to help folks get the spotlight and get their, craft out there. But there's so much more. And I think that there's going to be more I'm probably going to be like busy spotlighting artists on this podcast for, honestly, I want to say like 2 years is what I kind of like estimate. And more than that if, everybody's willing to come out and get, on the podcast. So
That's pretty good.
yeah, I'm stoked.
You're not really up there rapping. You're more just a part of the community. How did you get into hip hop?
Well, just from listening to hip hop as a kid, then I've always considered myself a fan. And so with that being said, I never thought I could actually be a productive element for the community in any kind of way. You know what I mean? I just saw it as, well, there's the artists up there, and I have and always have had so much respect for the artists that there's just that, like, they're doing cool stuff. I can't even be part of that. You know what I mean? Like, and especially as me, like I said, I'm not a wordsmith. I'm not, a performer in any kind of way, nothing like that at all. I'm just a voice, and a tech guy that knows how to work with technology, and was able to start the podcast easily enough to make it comfortable for everybody to come, and so yeah.
Well, and that's a voice in and of itself, right? You might not be up on stage, but doing a podcast and bringing these people on, that's no small feat.
Yeah, it's been a lot of work. It's definitely been a lot of work.
The behind the scenes work is the hardest. The editing of the
Yeah.
podcast.
That's the time consuming thing.
Yeah.
That's the real work. Like when I've got a bunch of episodes in front of me, I did that on purpose, so that way it's almost like I can't let a mountain get too big. You know what I mean? I got to keep at it. You know what I mean? Because it is a lot of work on the back end. But for me, like I just love hip hop enough to where I'm fine with supporting the community on this level. I mean, I'm always looking for some sponsorships, you know what I mean? And I'm hoping to get some sponsorships coming up with, continued consistency of the podcast. If I can be consistent, then people will be like, okay, he's consistent. Let's start to back him. You know what I mean? I would love to have, get repaid for some of the money that I put into the studio equipment that I've got, you know what I mean? And stuff like that. But even if not, I work in the corporate world. And so I pay, invoices to like, companies for like marketing and stuff like that, for instance. And like, I see the, cost in the corporate world of like marketing, of like the stuff that I do, which is just what anybody could honestly do. Any fan can do what I do, which is go to the Fat Bowl Cyphers and take some pictures. I'm on a Samsung. Some of y'all have iPhones. Those are way better cameras than these Samsung cameras. So like, go out there and take pictures and like send them to your artists. The artists love that because they're gonna repost that in their stories, and that's free marketing. That's like free, and if you charge a photographer, they're going to charge you hundreds of thousands of dollars to come to a show, to record you and all that. And, there's all the nonsense with that, where if it's organic, if you just have like your fans going out there, that's what I am. I'm just a fan of hip hop, and I'm a fan of Knack One and Highway and Eli Fowler and Flo J and Brian Swislow and all the other artists that are out there, and I'm happy to support them by the simplest things that I can do, which is just taking pictures and videos and giving it to them. With the podcast, that is more work. That's more work. And so that's why, like I said, I'm interested in, getting, some sponsorship at some point, but at one point I kind of looked at, for the things that I do between the photos and the videos, that's just one thing. Like I said, that's easy to do. Just take it on your phone and send it out. That doesn't take that much time at all. But I'll also make some videos. Like I'll make cut up, cool little videos, and put them in the reels and everything like that to spotlight the artists. But also to like, get my brand out there in the community. You know what I mean? And hopefully the algorithm picks it up and blows it up. Like I'm hoping the other artists blow up as well. You know what I mean? So I make those little videos. But like those little videos, like those things, that's pricey stuff right there. Once you start stepping into like the video realm, especially with there's only being so many people around here doing it, it ends up being like thousands upon thousands of dollars that I would say of my time that I donate to the community, and I'm completely happy to do it. You know what I mean? That's just my love for hip hop. When I started to come up on all these artists that are around here and see like, oh, this is actually a scene, and saw the limited amount of exposure, that was like that was some incongruence there for me. And I'm like, as a fan of hip hop, with the skills that I had on the technical front, and it cost, I just bought a Zoom PodTrack P4, the little tiny mobile unit, you know what I mean? So now I can just take that anywhere and record, it's minimal on my input in my view. Like I'm happy to put money into it, into hip hop, into the culture around here. You know what I mean? If it wasn't me doing this, then I would be going to the shows like I do and spending money there. You know what I mean? So I want hip hop to succeed and thrive in Humboldt County as it has been doing, and I just wanted to continue to snowball into something that where this vibrant scene that is around here blows up to where people actually see it. You know what I mean? For what it is. There's a lot of artists from outside the area that come here, and it's really a hidden just trove of talent. Like it's hard to even kind of grasp until you do go out to like the ciphers and then the shows and like see, wow, like it's the level of hip hop, it's not subpar. Like, I grew up in different suburbs at points, and people were, I've grown up around people that weren't making great music. You know, I've seen that. You know, I've seen people not making great music around here. You know, before I got more heavily invested into the hip hop scene, I've seen that. You know, more of, and maybe those are just more hobbyists or you know what I mean. But it takes talent to make great music. We know that. And the music that is around here, after I've listened to it for the last few years, like I'm blown away at the quality of it. It's not that like, kind of smaller time music with just like, some people that are new to music making beats and somebody that's new to music hopping on the beats. There's the newer artists around here, but even the newer artists around here, I mean, they're dope. Like they know they've taken the cues and the elements from the dope people that are around here. And that's one of the cool things is that the culture, continues, and these young kids that are around here, are doing it. I just dropped a podcast with the group Area Sound, Zach and Steamer. Shout out to Zach and Steamer. They're both. Zach is currently involved in education locally. He's a teacher at a school, and then Steamer was years ago, and they've gone the route of like promoting hip hop to the students that they were working with, and I had so much. I was about to cry in the studio, like with those dudes when they're doing that. Because my son, he's 13 years old, and he's into hip hop, and he makes music. I've set him up with his own studio, and he makes his own beats, records his own vocals, drops it all. You know what I mean? And he's at a school where he doesn't have the validation that like Zach, aka Zigzag Zilla, from Area Sound, the teacher, that he's given his students. He said he weekly puts on, like, he has them all go on stage. They set up the sound equipment, and they just have these young kids in this middle school start spitting rhymes and rapping. You know what I mean?
I think I watched that one in 6th grade. They were doing that. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's so positive for the elements of. I mean, hip hop is a popular culture. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying it's a pop culture. It's a popular culture. At the same time, it's also, I would still say the true elements of hip hop are a counterculture. And so, but it's popular at this point. And in a certain sense, like I'd say from when I grew up to now, hip hop has taken a lot of the share that like just generally like pop music had. Like hip hop takes a lot of that money now. And so it's popular music, you know what I mean? And so kids are going to be into it, you know what I mean? In schools and stuff like that. And so for there to be that platform that, like I said, Zach is doing at the school to put those kids on and validate them like that. Wow, man. Like I wish my kid was, at that school, at his school, you know what I mean? Like it's needed around here. You know what I mean? Like we need more of that. It's just beautiful to see.
Well, yeah, and anything that promotes good music, and gives these kids a platform to try it out if they want to even just try it and see if they like it and see if that's something that they want to pursue or just do for fun. We didn't have that when I was in 6th grade. Nobody was putting those on for us,
Yeah. Yep. No, I know. That was, that's kind of interesting, man. That takes me way back. When that was the first time, because I was I've been in hip hop my whole life.
Well, talk to me. How did you end up in the desert?
The desert? Yeah, absolutely.
How does that happen?
Yeah, so I grew up in L.A. in the Wilshire district, and so my mom really, honestly, to move us away from the city, and also, it was cost of living was cheaper out in the Mojave Desert in Victorville, where I did junior high and high school. It was safer than being in the city where we were. The schools were maybe not necessarily better educationally, but the schools were a little bit safer. And so, to move us away from those elements, my mom moved me and my brother and my stepdad, we moved up to the high desert. And, just stayed there, and there's nothing going on in the Mojave Desert, man. Like, there's nothing going on
That's
there.
a surprise.
Yeah, I know.
I would have thought that'd be the place to be.
Like, it's popping, right?
Yeah.
You gotta go out to Vegas and on that side of, out to Nevada, But, I was there, and thank goodness got out of there. I know people that I went to high school with that didn't, you know what I mean? And for there to be nothing going on there and then to still be stuck there. I couldn't even imagine that. That was just the plan, was to go to school somewhere else. You know what I mean? I started going to school at Cal Poly Pomona when I first started going to college, and then after 6 months, after a semester there, transferred up here because it was just easy. I could do an intra-district transfer form or whatever it was, and just go from one Cal State school to another. And yeah, came up here and been here, got a good job. When I graduated, I was in school for longer than I had wanted to be. You know what I mean? I switched majors. I started as a computer science major at Cal Poly Pomona, and then came up here, and the computer science major was the major itself was kind of faltering. They were losing a lot of good staff or something like that, if I recall. And so I switched my major to business and got my degree in business, and got a good job, and have been working there since. I've been with the company that I work for now for about 13 years.
And that's Stream Guys? What is that?
That's correct. Yeah,
Stream
Stream Guys. Yeah, Stream Guys has been doing services for about 22 years for broadcasters all over the globe. Stream Guys basically runs clouds and radio broadcasters, or just different people that are broadcasting their events or audio or video events out. They send their source signal up to Stream Guys, and then we distribute it out to their audience. We're like the backbone.
So you guys are like a radio station through the cloud.
We're like the phone line for the radio station.
Okay.
Like, for instance, like HumboldtHotAir.org, like that's one of our clients. You know what I mean? We love supporting local radio. You know what I mean? We have K-Mud is also a client, you know, really well-known local radio, community radio, right? But yeah, we love supporting local, and it's really cool when there are radio stations around here, because they want to spend money locally too. Typically, it's kind of the, you know, we know where we live and we know what people like to do, you know, and so they're like, oh, Stream Guys exists, like a company that's doing those services. Well, that's great, you know what I mean? So I was really glad when like HumboldtHotAir.org lifted off. That's another outlet in the community now, and shout out to Neroli. She's doing great down there, and I'm glad to see what she's doing. She's putting a lot of different shows on, and it's just more content for the community in a form that's I don't know. I don't think radio's ever going to be completely lost. That's this interesting thing, right? Everything's moved to video, and, you know, and we're going in that direction. But I mean, FCC is still out there issuing licenses to radio stations. Terrestrial radio stations are still, you know, having sales teams that are selling ad time and making money, and, you know, so I don't see radio going anywhere. You know what I mean?
You think it's going to stick around?
It may be in a different form. We talk about that a lot at Stream Guys.
That's it.
Know?
I think it'll stay if it adapts,
Mm-hmm.
like Netflix did. If they lean into what the internet offers of unfiltered media,
Mm-hmm.
and they get rid of all these FCC restrictions, I think then it has a chance. But if it stays rigorous and isolated in that you have to be in this box and that's where you're going to stay,
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't think it looks good.
Yeah, I know. I mean, because, you know, Sirius has come in and, you know, changed a lot of that already.
Seriously, even just Spotify, you could just play the music that you want to listen to. Every car is
Yep.
Bluetooth now.
Yep, 100%. That's exactly what I do. So yeah, you know, and I'm not even a podcast guy. You know what I mean? I don't consume any podcasts. That's one of the funny things at the place I work is some of us are kind of like we're content snobs, because we serve, you know, we're responsible for so many clients and serving up so much content that you got to be like really cool content to get on our radar. You know what I mean? But you know, I don't spend my time like listening to too many podcasts unless there's like a cool hip hop podcast that drops and I'm like, okay, let's check that out. But typically those have been more like mini series, like short series, like depicting some event or some like scene somewhere. You know what I mean? Or like maybe death, you know what I mean? They're more shorter lived. The main one that's a longer one that's gotten big that I knew of was, like I said, the Combat Jack show, and he passed. So since then, man, it's, you know, that on the hip hop scene in general, it's just a lot of content out there. So, you know, with the scene so saturated, I've already got my own I can, you know, focus on.
Yeah, again, you're in that niche. You've got
Yeah.
the spot. So if there aren't other ones dropping, That's almost better for you. You can say, hey, guys, Hip Hop Humboldt.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, especially if they're local. You know what I mean? Because there have been local hip hop podcasts, and they slow down and pick back up sometimes. It's happened. Like I said, I was just on a Saad's show, and he and Tyler with Rude Entertainment and another local gentleman by the name of Not a Clue. They were, to my understanding, they were doing a podcast for a while there, and it's just, going back and forth and bantering, talking about, different topics that are, popular and being talked about in the community and stuff like that. And it's cool. Like, I really like the banter kind of element, I've done these interviews with the artists around here, and they've showcased all like their themselves, their brands, their art. But the cooler podcasts that are more memorable for me are the ones where, like, towards the end of it, we're kind of going back and forth and just talking about different things. You know what I mean? Like, then you really get that connection. That's what I'm going for. Like, I want to help these artists, like, build that connection with the fans and the audience in Humboldt County. That's, like, crucial. You know what I mean? If you don't build that, that's something that, like, Highway's great at, is, like, building that connection with people. He's great on social media. He knows how to write a story, visualize it out, and connect with his audience. And so I think that's one element, but that's just one reason why he's been so successful around here. You know what I mean? So it's really an art, and there are the people that can do that short form content or TikToks and everything like that and whatnot. And there's the people that can't. I can't. I'm not great at it. I'm like, I'm more of a, I like a real short TikTok that's like a joke. I don't like the long videos or the long, the longer short forms, the 3-minute TikToks and stuff like that. I get kind of bored, which is horrible to say, right? That's a short attention span for a 38-year-old man. You know what I mean? But yeah, if it's a 3-minute TikTok, it's got to be like teaching me a history lesson. You know what I mean?
It's a weird switch that gets flipped because we say that, right? But then you're producing hour-long content, multiple hour-long content, and people watch that.
Yeah.
It just has to be engaging. Mm-hmm. If you make it 60 seconds and it's dog shit, nobody's going to watch it.
Yep.
If you make it 2 hours and it's good, people are going to sit through that.
Mm-hmm. Fully. And that goes back to, that's a good point, because that goes back to how I was saying that it's kind of like this podcast, at least currently, I feel like it's more of an artist podcast, with the local artists are the guys that I'm getting the most feedback from, that are like, oh, this is dope, because they've been in the scene. They've been a part of the scene. Like, they're vested in the scene. And so they're like, they're wanting to see this happen. You know what I mean? So they've been the ones that have been listening, and I've been getting the most feedback from them. And so that's been cool, but yeah.
Having those conversations it's worthwhile. You get something out of it. I always said that this is a selfish pursuit because I get the most out of it. Even if I didn't post them, it would just be fun for me to do.
I know what you mean.
And the added benefit is that other people get to listen in. There is that archival aspect, though, that freaks me out when I think about it. The idea that everything you say on here is now out there forever. Unless you delete it, which you can, but if somebody clips it or...
It's out there. Once it's out there, you got to assume it's out there.
You have to.
Right? No, 100%. No, that goes back to, I kind of scour my podcast to try to make sure there's nothing too personal on there, you know what I mean? I think in one of the episodes recently, one of the gentlemen like dropped an address for somebody, and but it was from their address from like 20 years ago. So they're not living there no more, you know what I mean? But I verified that. I'm like, okay, let me make sure that he's still not there, you know what I mean? Because we can't just have people's address going out there, and then that's archived on, my podcast is on Spotify and also on YouTube. So then, it's out there, so.
Yeah, you're not putting the toothpaste back in the bottle.
Yeah, So, yeah, and you got to be, it's good to be careful when you are, like, when these artists that haven't gotten a whole lot of exposure, you got to work with them and, make sure that they're not putting themselves in a bad place, and you're not putting yourself in a bad place either. You don't want artists or anybody locally or anybody mad at you for not editing properly and letting their personal information out there,
Yeah, that's why we do this live now, is that it's out there. In some sense, it's out there. It's a double-edged sword, right? Because if somebody comes on here and says something crazy, it's out there.
Right.
But you also get the added benefit, and I don't know if you run into this, where somebody says, "Hey, can we cut some things out of there? I want to edit this podcast a little bit for you."
You know, what's been really cool about it is the recordings have gone so smoothly that there's been not one single person that has said that. And there's been, the more of the time suck is as I'm editing, I'm also going through and then pulling out certain audio clips to audiogram, right? And then that adds on, a few minutes each time I do one of those in the middle of the, reviewing and editing the podcast. But typically, like, these dudes are pretty dialed, and it's not live, but I haven't had to edit that much. To be honest with you, most of it's been me. Just losing the kind of train of thought that I may be on, and then just cutting that out and then clipping back through. But yeah, it's been pretty solid and smooth. It could almost be live, as dope as these artists are, and as smooth as it's been.
Yeah, the people that come on here aren't quite as polished all the time. Because you have the structure, at least in, okay, hip hop. We could do hip hop. You can come on here and say whatever you want to say, and sometimes the cat gets away from you a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You start running around, you're like, where did this conversation go? What are we talking about right now?
Well, I was watching your podcast, and you talk about it. You and your guests talk about a lot of different topics.
It's very open-ended.
Yeah, and so I think that's good. Like I said, I like the kind of the banter and back and forth and things moving in a different direction from, unless it's specifically intended to be a real, firm, solid structure, I think people like that more. They're more engaged with the conversation type.
It's more authentic that way.
Mm-hmm.
Do you plan out questions for yours, or just rough ideas?
I don't want anybody to be mad, but I don't plan out anything.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Yeah, and I almost I'm starting to think like I should kind of at least prep the artist like, this is what we're just gonna go over. It's just gonna be, hey, you get your time to go over your history. But I also think that some of the artists that haven't kind of been keyed in since the start of it, that have been on, once I talk to them and they have been invited, they check the pod out to okay, what is he about? You know what I mean? I know that's happening, and I think that's only reasonable. You want to know what the person's about. You know what I mean, before you hop on the show. But it also, I haven't said anything to anybody to preface the situation, so they might be wondering, what is he going to want to talk to me about? Is he going to get on there and I don't know, you know what I mean? They just may not know. So it's been off the cuff.
In a way, I kind of respect the people that go in blind and haven't watched any of the podcasts or haven't seen any clips, because you don't know what's going to happen. You're really just going in and trusting that this person is going to get you where you need to go safely.
Yeah. My main thing, I generally, my main thing for me was, I know that this area, there's a good amount of red-minded people. And so...
red being conservative.
Conservative, yeah. And so... my only, I was looking at some of your episodes, and some of my friends have been on here too. You know what I mean? Like one of my friends, Naughty Little, was on here.
Oh yeah, shout out to Naughty.
Yeah,
it was a fun podcast.
Yeah,
she's awesome.
She's awesome. Oh yeah. And I looked at that episode to kind of see what things were about. And I didn't get any oh my gosh, this guy's red and gonna put me on the spot about some stuff, or you know what I mean. I've been lightly involved in local, like I say, community building, and I want to say politics for a while. I was on the Humboldt County Human Rights Commission for a while, and people kind of know me from that, and I had my hands in that, and I didn't want. I know how things can be around here with politics once you start to get a certain level of exposure, and
what does that mean?
So, I think, so personally, I'm a fairly left-minded person. I'd say I'm pretty, in my view, I was formerly an anarcho-socialist, and I think I've moved in the last like year or two pretty firmly to anarcho-communism. And so I think around here, like that would be viewed as not normal at all. Even just that kind of rhetoric or placing yourself in that like political position of that's where you place yourself. You know what I mean? And I'm like I say, having been involved in politics, I've had some eyes on me, and I've been pretty vocal about my politics, about being very pro Black Power and Black excellence, pro Black Power and Brown pride. You know what I mean? Pro uh, well, actually anti capitalism, anti-racism. You know what I mean? I've been very vocal about those things locally, and so I think when you start to get a level of exposure and say certain things that are in a direction that's moving out of the pocket, out of maybe what some call the Overton window, maybe, or just generally accepted mainstream politics, people start to think a different way about you. They agree with you or they don't. You know what I mean? And so, with that being said, I know how politics are around here. I've seen how things, operate politically. Like I said, I was on the Human Rights Commission, so I've seen how the county
It sounds like
operates.
this is coming from, a personal perspective, that you ran into this brick wall a couple times.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. Even even from it's so interesting because whether they're red or blue, you can run into roadblocks when you're a person of color around here trying to engage in politics, right? And so that's one of the things where that's kind of tapered my. And this is live and broadcast, and it's going to be out there, and that's completely fine by me because now I'm no longer involved in politics. I will honestly, in my own personal view, like I would never get involved with politics locally again because of how it operates on different levels and the hardships that I faced, and so I'm fine with my politics being out there. With that being said, I'm also running this podcast, and so that's a brand now that's out there. And so it makes you be careful with how you put yourself out there in the community. Just for instance, like I purged probably about a third of the people off of my Facebook list. I had gained a lot of people since I was on the Human Rights Commission, and I also ran for the the Humboldt Community Services District Board a few years ago and lost. Fortunately, I wasn't the lowest vote getter out of everybody running, you know what I mean? But it was.
That's always a good thing, right? You don't want to be the lowest guy on the totem pole.
Exactly.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, that would have been rough for me. Yeah, it would have hurt my ego a little bit. But I didn't win, and so that was fine. But then I got appointed to the Human Rights Commission, and so I wouldn't get involved in it any longer in a direct way. I'm more than happy to and willing to support Black and Brown people that are willing to get engaged in the local community. But me myself, like being directly involved in it, I don't want to do that. Just because, like I said, the things that I faced, and so that's brings me back to that idea of that's what's made me taper how I taper off and really
kind of hone your presentation or your outward public persona.
100%, 100%. And it's hard.
I was going to say, has that been a hard line to balance? Because I'm guessing you still feel the same way you felt, but now you kind of have to close that off to the public.
100%. And that's why I purged a bunch of people off my Facebook, because I'm like, well, no, people don't need to see all my politics anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want that out there, social media is this interesting place where I got these terms that I use with my friends, right? But we got the salty social media screenshotters, you know what I mean? That are all the once
everybody's looking to get some dirt.
Yeah, especially in a smaller area like this.
And they're not afraid to use it. Once they get that, they're gonna run wild with it.
Oh yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, I've heard things about myself, and once it comes back around and gets to me, I'm like, wow, that's this, off of, like I said, when you say things politically around here, people will take it and they will run, you know what I mean? And I'm a person that I hold everyone around me to a high standard, and I try to hold everything that I'm either involved in to a high standard. And so that ruffles feathers sometimes. You know what I mean? I'm more than happy to be vocal about the stuff that I don't like that I see in this county. You know what I mean? With the school becoming Cal Poly Humboldt, they're bringing a lot of students in, and the board of supervisors has a lot of work that needs to be done to make this place more acceptable for the students that come here, to make them want to stay. That's been this constant thing in Humboldt County from when I moved here. I've learned about it. People get their degree and leave. You know, it's just been this normal kind of thing where we're losing a lot of talent that way, and we need talent up here. You know, we keep certain talent, but it's minimal. A lot of people just leave. And so if the board of directors could actually address some of these issues around here better, then, you know, it might make some of these students stay and stick around and want to help this place, you know, grow and grow, you know, more beautiful. You know, it's a boon for this for this county that Cal Poly is, that Humboldt State is now Cal Poly.
There's a lot of money there.
Yeah.
What are some of these issues that you think they need to address?
Well, I mean, definitely one of the issues that I addressed when I was on the Human Rights Commission was homelessness. I was on the homelessness committee.
That's a big problem. That's a big problem, not just up here, but throughout the state
and country generally too. You know, especially in the metro areas. You know, but definitely in California. I mean, you know, we've seen in Humboldt County something that's done just about. I don't want to say everywhere, but very often you see it happen in a lot of places where homeless people just get ticketed and moved to the next place. And there's never, you know, it's capitalism. It's not set up to get support to people that need it. You know what I mean? It's more set up to do the opposite, to suck support away from communities and the people that need it. So it's hard. It really is hard. And I don't know what the solutions are. You know what I mean? But I've seen good things that have happened. And I think that there is work that the board of supervisors can do
that they're not doing.
You know.
Now, were these the views that you were expressing that got you in hot water when you were in politics? Or I guess what is anarcho-communism? I've never heard that term before.
Yeah, absolutely. Anarcho-communism would just basically be anarcho-communism. You got the side of anarchy, which for me, you know, different people take anarchy different ways. You know, you've got your anarcho-capitalists, right? That I would say that kind of maybe resembles something more like what we saw in the Purge movies, if you've ever seen those movies.
That's a scary thought.
Right? You know what I mean? Then you've got, you know, anarcho-socialists and anarcho-communists that, at least I can't say what other people, how they engage in their politics, but for me, that is the tenets of anti-capitalism, anti-racism, anti-hierarchy. That's one of the big things, like power being decentralized. I think that in capitalism, it's so easy for power and wealth to get structurally funneled upwards, right? And so that hierarchy is what sets up that structure. And so, you know, the principle of less hierarchy for me is more decentralization of power, you know, more individual groups maintaining their rights and control of their lives. You know what I mean? There's so many things now. I mean, we, you know, for all intents and purposes, a lot of people say we practically live in the matrix now, right? And so it would be great to, I mean, when I was growing up, you know, we weren't fully in the matrix yet. You know, I'm 38, you know, and that was the 90s, you know, but now here we are, and I'm more for people breaking out of the systems of, you know, control and, you know, that want to take wealth. You know, I mean, it's just, you know, it's the country that we live in, right? You know, it's all about the almighty dollar, and you know, just for instance, we've got all these problems in this country. I was just talking about homelessness. There's a lot of different problems in the country, but a lot of money is, you know, spent in terms of the federal budget. It's spent on, you know, the military-industrial complex, right? You know, we've got just in recent times, right? We've got Puerto Rico having, I think it was Hurricane Fiona just hit over there, and they're without power on the whole island, I think, and I think it's like about 196,000 people without any potable water. I mean, and that's a U.S. Not a colony. It's not an out. Is it an outlying state? It's part of the United States. It's not a state. You know what I mean? But it's an outlying. Puerto Rico's part of us now, and they're not. It's getting no media coverage. And I want to bet that hey, we saw Donald Trump throw the paper towels at Puerto Rico when everything happened years ago when he was the president, and we don't see Biden doing anything. Even that's almost even worse. Not even any nothing.
Well, we have cities in the States without clean water. That's when it
Facts.
gets dicey.
That's very true.
When you realize there are people, even this close to home, that don't have clean drinking water.
Yep.
They have to go buy bottled water.
Yep. I mean, Flint is still without water. I just posted that on my social media, 100%. Jackson, Mississippi, capital city of Mississippi, of a state, and
No clean water.
No clean water. I mean, I saw, posts on, tweets on Twitter where, I've got doulas that were like, I've got new, mothers that just gave births with C-sections that are looking for water. Like, and that's in our country. I mean, yeah.
Google how many people live in Jackson, Mississippi. It's a pretty big city. It's the capital city, right?
Mm-hmm.
And no clean water.
It's insane. I saw that.
And Flint, Michigan, how many years has that been going on now?
I know it's been over 8. It's been a long time. I heard that
population of Jackson, Mississippi is 163,778 people as of 2020.
That's like Humboldt County. That's crazy.
No clean water.
They just found
Google Humboldt County population. Are we that big?
I think last time I thought it was around 160. Is it more like 120?
Jesus.
But yeah, that's one of the new struggles coming up. Even in our country now, staying in a place with clean running water is going to be.
Humboldt County population 136,101. Damn. I didn't know we were that big. So yeah, we're like 40 under. That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people.
To not have clean drinking water. We take that for granted. We're over here, we flush our toilets. Yep. Nobody cares.
Oh, yeah. My lady's always, cut that, don't sit there and leave the water on when you're brushing your teeth. Look at all those people that don't have clean water, Plus, water is getting more expensive for us, too. I mean.
Well, the fact that you have companies that just, like Coke, you just own water. You just bottle water and you sell it to people.
Mm-hmm. Nestle's one of the biggest culprits, man. They're doing so much bad with their bottled water and all their. Nestle's horrible. Such a horrible company. They've done so much bad. So yeah, that's one of the new struggles is going to be.
It's going to be clean water. That is going to be a problem. And so the anarcho-communism.
Yeah.
So that is your platform. You were getting with distribution of wealth. Where does that lead? Because that's a big one, right? With the communist ideas, we need to take the wealth that is isolated at the top and redistribute it to the bottom.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's this interesting time where humanity, I feel, capitalism has drained humanity as well as the planet. It's left both of us pretty scarred. And so we've got to find some other systems. And there's the ideas of how communism has been run in the past and how other countries have done it right, and then there's also the ideas of, communism is, in general, you would think, I would say, politically, has, at least in the sense of the United States, communism has been a targeted enemy of capitalism. From what we saw with McCarthy, communism has been consistently been presented as evil. There's been there's been communist parties in the United States that have existed. Actually, one of the first black women presidential candidates, unless I'm wrong, she was from the Communist Party. And so, it's existed in the United States, but it's just always been stigmatized. And for me, communism is whatever resources that may still be left on this planet, let's try to share them as much as possible. We've seen how capitalism has treated things, like I said, we've got to go a different way.
But haven't we? The argument to that would be right. Is that haven't we seen how communism goes? Just like how we see capitalism going, but we've seen this path with communism, and it doesn't seem like it ends
You know,
in a great way.
we've definitely seen it. What I feel is a large problem with the political spectrum and how parties operate in the past, present, and probably the future is authoritarianism. Like once you start to, like for instance, the Communist Party of China, right? It's communist, okay, but power is still pretty concentrated at the top. Xi Jinping, gosh, I can't maybe pronounce his
I
name.
think that's his name.
Yeah, I mean, he's still for all intents and purposes, practically an authoritarian dictator in a sense. So when you get power concentrated, I think power corrupts. I think it's a natural human trait. I think it's something that's just been known for an awful long time. And, I think that society has been run in a certain way for an awful long time. I think that war has been this common theme that has, we saw the Greek during the Greek times and then the Roman times. The Roman Empire was one of the greatest empires in human history, right? And it spanned practically the globe, And I draw a lot of corollaries between the Roman Empire and the United States, both just very imperialistic societies. And, we've seen a lot of these different regimes be authoritarian, but there's never been, I feel like, actual democratic communism that actually works for the people. In my lifetime, we haven't had that, and I can't say in the past we've ever had that. And it's whether it's a lack of imagination and whatever people have that imagination to try to enact that world. Like I'm an abolitionist, you know what I mean? So I'm anti-capitalist, right? I'm pro-abolishing the prisons, you know what I mean? I'm pro-abolishing the police. Now for me, that means changing the way policing goes, right? Policing in this country started as slave catching and technology's evolved, but not much else since. It still operates in a lot of the same ways. And so if we can break up the roles and responsibilities, the heavy load that currently law enforcement officers have, that to me is abolishing the police. If we can get more money towards Shantae Cat and the people and Nezzy Wade and the people locally that are trying to help homelessness, and more money towards social workers, a better ecosystem of drug rehabilitation, right? Drugs are a problem around here. They've been a problem, right? Like if we had more money for that, being on the Human Rights Commission, I worked with some of the people around here that are doing some of those things, and I came from a bad perspective. Actually, I just even spouted that same bad perspective again a second ago, where I said we need a better ecosystem of drug rehabilitation. The interesting thing about it is there actually is a ecosystem of drug rehabilitation around here. It just needs a lot more money based on the need. And so when you've got so much need, unmet need, then here we are in California with homelessness like it is, and in the county like it is. You know what I mean? So if power were more spread out, if groups were able to get the funding that they need federally and statewide, we just need more of it around here, then some of these problems could start to alleviate. But then, right, when you start to say that, isn't that socialism? Like some people are going to say that's socialism. Some people are going to say that's communism, giving more money, the government giving more money to groups that need it. You know what I mean? Well, I don't know. I would say that I see groups around here that are making art that are having a hard time making it. And if they got money to promote their art, and I'm talking about like BIPOC groups, Black, Indigenous, people of color groups, right? Like if they got more money from the government, from the state government, to engage in the work that they're doing, it would get more exposure and it would have more an effect around here. You know what I mean? And that's once again going against capitalism. You know what I mean? That's going against the structure of things. In capitalism, there's always going to be winners and there's always going to be losers. And so, currently, like I would say personally, like we live in a racial capitalism in this country. It's also exists in Europe. You see in France. You know what I mean? In Great Britain, in London, in England. I'm sorry. But
What does that mean?
a racial capitalism?
Yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely. So racial capitalism is, so like I said, capitalism, you're going to have your winners and your losers. Racial capitalism, it's structurally set up to have more, and the way it's currently set up, at least in this country, the more melanin you have in your skin, the more it's structurally set up for you to lose. Now, there's going to be a lot of people that take a lot of qualms with that, like whether it's non-BIPOC people that feel differently, that just don't agree with that, or even I've got plenty of black family and friends and brown family and friends that would say that's wrong as well. Like we can make it, you know what I mean? Like, you work hard, you put your effort into it and you can do it because I did it. Like, they'll say that. My own grandmother, she was successful. She was a black woman who worked oh my gosh, how can I not? Maybe it's just because I'm live. I can't remember what GE. I think it was either GE or a company like that. But she was a typist and this was the 50s, the 1950s, when they were just barely, letting black women do that kind of thing. And so it was like, let's start doing that. And she got a job doing that. She always told me, you can do whatever you want to, you know what I mean? And so that was one of the influences that I had in my life, was that if you put your mind to it and work hard, you can do whatever you want to. And I think that's true. But I also know in the society, and especially in this country that we live in, there are barriers depending on what community you're coming from socioeconomically as well as racially. You know what I mean? I think that it's going to be harder for a person with more melanin to succeed. And that's my stance.
Do you think that's because of the melanin or because of the economic status?
Well, that I definitely wouldn't say economic status, because we've got rich, black people, rich people of color. You know what I mean? And so that definitely exists out there. But I think it does everyone a disservice to ignore how things are structurally set up and how they've been structurally set up in this country. We can almost even look at I'll make a corollary to something that has gone on and even kind of came back recently. And what I'm talking about is Bank of America and just generally the banks redlining, right? They would, create a district, and if you were outside that district, if you were in the red line district, they weren't going to give you a home loan. You know what I mean? And so that disproportionately disaffected people of color, black people, brown people in communities in the United States for decades and decades, right? And so that's been known. They supposedly ended that, you know what I mean? But socioeconomically, if you look at things right now, and like I said, Bank of America, they just did this promotion. I think it's still going on, where if you're African American, if you're a foundational black American, you can get a home loan regardless of your credit score, I think was the plan. And so on the face of it, right, and the way it's going to be put out there in the media, that's going to seem like, Bank of America some people might even say like, oh, look, Bank of America is giving some reparations to black people. You know what I mean? That's good things. That's like reversing things. That's reversing it. But I mean, then if you actually know the housing market and anything, I got my degree in business and with an emphasis in accounting. And so I'm finance. I'm kind of, I'm not a dummy with it. And so, I know what the housing market looks like right now. Housing prices are inflated. Interest rates are going up. And so, of course, Bank of America is going to try to put people into loans that potentially can't pay the loans and then default on those loans. And I follow a couple guys on Instagram, Earn Your Leisure and MG the Mortgage Guy, a couple other uh, financial people that were like, yeah, like they did this on purpose because they saw with interest rates going up, loan companies weren't originating loans. Like loan origination has gone down big time. And they were like, well, how can we increase our loan origination? How can we start giving out more loans? Hey, let's make this plan up. You know what I mean? It's going to sound great in the media. People are going to eat it up. It's going to give Bank of America points in the media because, like I said, some people are going to, whether you're whatever color, some people are going to say, "Oh, that they're doing a good thing. You know, they're helping black people out." But in the end, I think they're honestly doing quite a bit more of a disservice. It was actually it's it was not what it was meant to be, is my opinion on it. And so that's, those things, those structural things coming into place. And hey, if Bank of America ever got caught on it, if anything ever come out, if any ever emails or anything, anything ever came out on it, it's just a fine for Bank of America to pay, probably. You know what I mean? If at all. There might just be false advertising, maybe, or, I don't know. But it's just a fine. It's just a penalty for a bank, So those kind of things exist out there. Even today, those kinds of roadblocks, trying to set people up for failure. You know what I mean? And so it's hard for me to even, brings up a point in the hip hop, trying to loop back to hip hop a little bit, but still talk about this kind of topic. We just had Jay-Z. He was just in I think it was a Twitter space. Twitter's got these spaces now and everything, right? You go on there and there's a few speakers that can talk, and then everybody else is just listening. They're trying to move in on Stream Guys' space, you know what I mean? But Jay-Z was on one, and he was like, yeah, they're always moving the bar because, I get successful, then they come out with this, and then a bunch of people come out with this term, black capitalist. And I was definitely upset with him because what he's forgetting is that, like, he took offense to being called like a black capitalist. He's like, he's basically what he was trying to say was, I'm a black man. I did what I'm supposed to do. I came up. This is my art. I did the grind. I did the hustle and did it. And, I'm not, maybe he was, I think in his mind was trying to say, I'm not like this caricature that people are trying to paint when they say black capitalist. That's all well and good, but to say that the term black capitalist has been created as a slur to talk mess about black people that have succeeded, like, that's just the name of capitalism. Again, there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers. You know what I mean? But for Jay-Z to try to, I think, and what the general tone was, to disavow that capitalism disaffects black people, like, that was, he set himself off way too far from thinking that. He got a lot of backlash from it. And so, yeah, I mean, I think you can try to not, you can ignore if you want to the fact that, like, the structure exists in that fashion to create a racial capitalism. But I mean, we don't even have to talk about it in the United States. We can look at, like, let's say France. Like, France has they colonized a lot of countries in the Caribbean and in Africa, right? Created all this debt for these countries, and even to this day, like, they say these countries owe this debt. And, like, I think it was like, Haiti was trying to get, like, a bunch of debt just, like, completely stricken now that the queen died or something like that. Like, all these different, like, barriers set up for people that don't deserve them. And it's just, these things have been in place for the longest time. Those, Haiti was a colony of France a long time ago, so none of this is new, and all these things have generally continued. There's been progress, I'm not gonna, while saying those things, I'm also not gonna disavow the progress that's made. But man, doesn't it, I mean, to me, it feels like, we're just consistently going backwards. You know what I mean? Like, I've, heard my grandma, she was, to talk about When we were going out and having to vote back in the, she was born in 31, so I'm assuming this was the 50s, Like she said, we had to go in groups because, you could, something could happen to you if you're black people in a small group or just a individual or two going to vote on voting day, depending on where you're at. You know what I mean? So that I feel like that kind of started to go in a different direction, but now we've still got like poll taxes. I mean, it's harder for people in the city, more often than not, people of color that are disaffected by having to go really far to get to their polling place and or stand in a really long line to vote. You know what I mean? So it's like, just the cities and the way people live is like a poll tax. You know what I mean? And so, in the last two elections, I've seen a lot of, is it gerrymandering? I don't think it's gerrymandering. There's a term for when you're at, like, let's say an office of elections. I almost, one election a while ago, I went and dropped my ballot in the election box at the Humboldt County Office of Elections. And I think I was wearing a Yes on 21 hat or a button. And the woman was like, no, you can't have that in here. Like, well, you can't talk about your politics or have your politics openly visible in like office of elections or polling places like that. But last two elections, man, I've seen, whether it's just Twitter gets news out there. I've seen plenty of instances in this country where there's been a lot of intimidation at polling places. You know what I mean? And so it almost feels like, while there's been progress on the civil rights and the civil rights front, it feels like things are going backwards on certain fronts too. It really does, But
doesn't it seem like this is always the argument you get, right? Is that if you enacted communism, there would still be that group that sucks up all the power.
mhm.
And then they point to China and say, this is the example. It's communist, but you still have the CCP that is the powerhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to be the continuum throughout history, is that idea of there's always going to be a group that achieves power. So how do you keep it? Do you think you could implement it in a way where it would stay with the people, or that's just the vacuum that happens?
It's really hard. I think it's really hard. Power just kind of, just at least everything nowadays, it just funnels up. And what I like that I've seen in recent times is some of the protests that have been happening, let's just say in Europe. We've had a lot of farmers protesting the last few months in different countries in Europe. And they're literally taking their big tractors and like stopping traffic, stopping everything. Because they're like, no, we're not going to. I've seen a lot of unrest all over the world because of increased energy prices, right? And like even that issue like I'm talking about, increased prices on farms, that's making farmers strike. You know what I mean? And in certain places, I feel like people have forgotten their power. I think here we've definitely, whether it's just we're all on different pages, and we were, at least I was raised, when I was, younger, there was the talk of, in school, there was the talk of the sleeping giant. You learned about World War II, and then, when, Japan hit Pearl Harbor, they awoke in the sleeping giant. You know what I mean? But I think that the sleeping giant's dead now. I mean, we're all on so many different pages that whatever power that we had in consensus and in joint strength, I think that the powers that be, continue to thrive based on us not having that consensus, us not being able to be on closer terms.
Well, that's just a theme throughout history. If the people unite, they're always going to be stronger than the government, because the government is made up of people.
Yep.
But again, do you think that's, what does that entail? How do you enact? People would have to have guns to enforce any equity, I guess, in that sense, for social power. Otherwise, how do you keep somebody else from just coming and taking what you have?
Yep.
Which is the trope, right?
Right. 100%. Power is at the political power comes at the end of a barrel of a gun, right? It's true. It's really true. We're not there as a human community and society yet. There's just too many pockets of despotism, authoritarianism, bad democracies. Completely countries with no democracy whatsoever. You know what I mean? Humanity's not there yet. I just personally think that whatever one can do in your own life and community to decentralize power and take your choices back in your life. We only have, in the corporate world, right? At least in this country, fortunately up here where we are, we have access to good foods, right? Like we've got Eureka Natural, the Co-op, different places you can get good foods. But I mean, I grew up in LA, and down there you've got to go out to Whole Foods. It's so very slim, and that's in LA. If you go back to where I grew up in the Mojave Desert, that's an area of I mean, I don't even know how many people are in that area. There's a lot of people there, and there's like one organic food store for like, I'm talking like a huge area of probably like 500,000 people. And there's one, and it's like a tiny store, like the size of like a Sally's Beauty Spa, or a tiny like hole in the wall of a store.
But doesn't that tie back into economic status? I would imagine Whole Foods is expensive. Eureka Natural Foods is expensive. You need an area that has a lot of money flowing into it so people can actually afford to go shop there.
Mm-hmm.
That's the big complaint, or I guess pro for fast food, is that it's supposedly cheaper so people can buy fast food and still be able to eat.
Mm-hmm. 100%. Yeah, it's that access it's interesting, but I think you're right though. It does have to do with how affluent you may be and the socioeconomics of the community. You know what I mean? In communities, that's why we got the food deserts, right? That they talk about in like urban areas and stuff like that. Like you'll go, like there's so many people that are using like one grocery store. You know what I mean? And they have to travel how long to get to that one grocery store. You know what I mean? It's access is an important thing, and I'm glad that we have the good access here. But the corporate world, in a lot of places, metro places especially, where you have less options, even in terms of stores, then those stores are having a certain buyer that's only buying these corporations, goods and everything like that. I mean, if you go to a Ralph's or like Vons usually has like good stuff. Vons Safeway, they've got good stuff. But like if you go to a grocery store that's not into organics and everything like that, I mean, that's pretty common. You know what I mean? Especially like in bigger cities, and that's that's other people making your decisions for you. That's what corporation is wanting to get their food into the stores.
Yeah, but isn't that controlled by us? Because if we just didn't buy that food.
Well, there's a buyer. There's a local buyer. Whether even for like Murphy's, right? They've got a buyer. You know what I mean? There's somebody like buying all of that. You know what I mean?
No, but I mean, if people weren't buying the food, then the store wouldn't buy that food and put it on the shelves, right?
True. That's true. Yeah. And I mean, hey, yeah, you go into Winco and there's plenty of people buying non-organic stuff in Winco. It's normal. It's just the normal way of things. You know what I mean? But
is that a race element, or where were we going with that?
It's definitely, it goes back to you talking about the socioeconomic. You know what I mean?
I think that's the biggest factor.
Yeah.
Is if you just draw the short straw and you're born into an area that's riddled with poverty, it doesn't matter what your skin color is. You're gonna have a hard climb to the top. But you can get there. It's gonna be hard.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was just talking with some people that were telling me that. Telling me how it is in London, where it's less about race and more about class. But, I mean, there's still the ideas that there's going to be, based on the statistics, there's going to be a larger percentage of melanated people that are, it's a capitalist country, right? That's not a socialist country. It's not a socialist country. I think even our country is what I call a socio-capitalist country because we have a safety net. We have Social Security and Medicare. Like if it was pure unfettered capitalism, like we would have like no safety net. Like not even that. So we do live in a socio-capitalist society. It just leans more towards capitalism, right? And so it was interesting to hear that in England it's more based on class. But I mean, I still see, the differences that, that people are treated by based on your race. You know what I mean? So, I'm interested in maybe going there and seeing what that's like. You know what I mean? Seeing how that's different from the United States. You know, I've always been interested in the class struggle. You know what I mean? Like we were talking about communism and socialism, and it would be interesting to see if what things look like if they're less based on race, like they are in this country, and more based on class. I actually just want to see what that looks like.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's. I mean, we're pretty class here. A lot of it, I think, is just disguised as racism, or that's just a factor that's lying on top of the economic factor, and
And
because
used often.
and because it stings a little more, that's the one that gets attributed to most things. But it's an economic thing
It's
where
what
you're
it boils down
born.
to.
Yeah,
100%.
and so I would imagine. I mean, I can see why you got into some hot water spouting those ideas, especially
Right.
locally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you also find some support? I know there are abolitionist groups in the sense that they want to destroy capitalism. They want to burn the system down because that's the only way we can build it back up in an equitable fashion. Was there
Locally?
was there unifying support in that?
Locally, I wouldn't say there was like a group. Locally, you may have some individuals that are invested in abolitionism and abolitionist politics. Um, you've also got, let's say, like there's like Humboldt Grassroots, right? They're a local anarchist group that they would spend their time engaging in some of that work. You know what I mean? But I don't. There's definitely not like a specifically abolitionist group, at least that I'm privy to. You know what I mean? And if there was, they might be smart enough to keep it quiet.
There's the I don't know if you've heard of the Peace and Freedom Party. That's the one I always fall back on. I've tried to get those guys on.
Oh,
they're
yeah,
pretty,
yeah.
They're pretty firm in their.
They're vocal about their
They're vocal,
politics.
but they don't want to. They don't want to talk about it at the same time.
Oh, I
They're
didn't know
vocal
that.
to their group, but that they seem pretty diehard with we got to burn this shit down. Yeah, that freaks me out when I hear people talk, and that's where I go. I don't know, just programming wise, with when you hear anarchy, you instantly think, oh, you want to burn down society. That's a problem.
Yeah. No, I know. It's interesting, right? Because you've got this interesting thing where
What is this? This is Humboldt Grassroots. Monarchy is a survival of the tyranny imposed by the hand of greed and treachery upon the human race in the darkest and most ignorant days of our history. It derives its only sanction from the sword of the marauder. That's James Connolly with a very rough picture of
Elizabeth.
the former queen.
It's true. That's one of the things. Local guy that I like. He said, "Is let's celebrate." It was on July 4th, and he said, "This Independence Day, let's celebrate the fact that we did break away from monarchy. You know, that is
At least we did that.
Yeah.
I mean, England still has a monarch, and it's paraded,
and a commonwealth and everything.
and people
it's crazy.
fund it, and they're just And then England likes to shit on us, and it's like, you have a fucking king now. You had a queen. What? But then how can you judge them when, you look at North Korea and you have a legitimate dictator that just wants to make nukes so he can do whatever he wants.
Go out with a bang.
Yeah. Or take people out with a bang, whatever one he gets to first.
Right. Yeah.
But that anarchist aspect, people hear that. And
I
they
know
get
it
a little
scares
uncomfortable.
people. No, definitely. It's at the and I want to bring up this interesting point with that. We all saw what happened in 2020 with Black Lives Matter and the Black Lives Matter movement specifically that year. Black Lives Matter has existed years before that. But we all saw what happened 2020, right? And I was out there protesting. I was out on in Eureka with the protest right after George Floyd died. There were quite a few people out there at that point in time, right? It was so interesting because the black and brown folks that I've talked to in the community and outside the community looked at the situation as there were a few months in 2020 where it felt like people understood that this is all screwed up. You know what I mean? That police brutality is a big problem. You know that just in general, the criminal justice system is a big problem. Um, and we got to do something about this. You know what I mean? And the country protested in a lot of different places in the country, all over the world at that point in time. Actually, there were protests everywhere, right? People might remember like the Wall of Moms that went up. You know what I mean? That was up in Portland. It kind of started there. You know, there was the protests that were going on in Portland was a big hot spot of it. Because I personally feel there's a lot of racism in the Pacific Northwest, and Portland is definitely a hotbed of it. You know, I think that black people weren't even allowed to lay their head in Portland, and it was either they weren't allowed to buy property or even just I think it was they weren't allowed to buy property until like the 1920s, something like that. You know what I mean? So there's just a legacy of like racism in Oregon, and so when the protests happened, PDX was a hot spot, you know, and so the Wall of Moms went up. That was a bunch of moms that came out and they were like, hey, like we support Black Lives Matter. We're not okay with the cops brutalizing these protesters. We're going to form a wall, and if the cops are going to hit the protesters, they're going to have to get through us, right? And so, the Wall of Moms. And so I watched all this very, very closely. Like any of my friends that know me on social media, one of the things that I've done, I did, and I don't do it as much anymore, was like when this was happening, I was posting it on social media like I was like a news outlet. Like, and I would be like, hey, look at all these updates from Portland, from all these different places. And then below it, I would just post all the different videos of police brutality, of the different things that were happening. And I mean, I have a lot of white family members and friends that like told me like, you opened our eyes to a lot. You know what I mean? So I was on top of all this when this was going down. And I remember I held this to a really high standard when this first happened and the Wall of Moms first started. I was like, man, like, I don't trust this. I don't know about this.
You were a little sketched out by the moms?
Yeah, I was like, this is seeming pretty performative, and I'm not. I'm really worried about this. And then lo and behold, like it wasn't even like 2 weeks later, like, you know, it goes back to what we were talking about, power and structure and things. And, you know, there was one woman that like started, I think it was some form of structure, nonprofit or whatever it may be, that like the Wall of Moms was under that, like I think it was like a nonprofit. And then like one person that was like in charge of that made some decisions that the general consensus, which included black women from other areas in the country that were running Wall of Moms, you know, cells in other countries. I don't want to say it like that, like, you know, like they're cells of, you know,
yeah.
like
Then you
soldiers.
start thinking terrorists,
right? You can't say that like that. You know, they're not cells. You know, groups, other Wall of Moms groups, right? You know, they were like, "Well, what are you doing?" She just completely went left, and the Wall of Moms collapsed within like 2 weeks. And so I didn't go out there and I'm like, you know, I told you so. You know, I'm not that type of person. Anybody who's on my social media, they saw it. They saw me say, I'm not sure about this.
But isn't that the same thing with Black Lives Matter? Didn't the people at the head of that spend an
100%.
absurd amount of money pull that up. Wait, I do want to read
color?
this.
Oh, yeah.
Buying houses and just balling out.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the Wall of Moms. Scroll back down there. You highlighted the group of where are we at here? The nonprofit accuses Wall of Moms, which announced Friday that its white members were stepping down as administrators, of filing for business registrations with the state behind the backs of the newly installed black leadership.
That was it right there. Yep.
Is that I don't understand what that means. For filing business registrations with the state, is that bad? What does that mean? Keep scrolling down. Black women started saying they were not protected by Wall of Moms leadership. The group wrote, too frequently would be in communication for safety, transport, etc., and when the time came, there would be zero response and no leadership to rely on. It's put many on the ground in direct danger. Wall of Moms founder Bev Barnum appeared to file for 3 registrations, including one to make the group a non-profit, the Oregonian reported. I don't understand why that's bad.
I
And
think.
what am I missing here?
I think it wasn't the structure that I think the group wanted as a consensus potentially. But you're right though. The same thing, not the same exact thing, but like what was happening there, what they were just describing there, where the people, the Wall of Moms, the different areas weren't getting the support from the head organization. That's exactly what happened with Black Lives Matter. The head, like national Black Lives Matter organization, was not giving money out to the different areas.
I hadn't heard of this. What? Close that for a sec. The founder of a Black Lives Matter chapter in Memphis, Tennessee, has been sentenced to 6 years and 1 day in prison for illegally registering to vote in 2019. Pamela Moses, 44, committed the voting offense while on probation. Now, look up Black Lives Matter founder spends a ton of money buying houses. That's what it was,
Yeah.
right? She
Patrisse
was
Cullors.
buying mansions.
Yep.
Patrisse Cullors. Here we go. Patrisse Colors.
It goes back to when power and what money
But isn't that
starts
just
to
human
funnel up.
nature then?
It is. It really is.
How do you fight that?
Man,
if
that's hard, right?
if every example in history we have, and even today, we have these people just sucking up power whenever it's given to them. I mean, is the idea that you could ever actually reach some sort of communist state, is that just a fairy tale at some level?
I would say currently it is because we don't have the systems in place. There's no, there's no lack of imagination. People may say there's a lack of imagination, but I think that there's plenty of people that have thought about the different ways to live, and there's different societies living in different ways all over the globe. But I do think that in general, that's just a human trait. I think it's just known that power corrupts, and
That's just part of it.
Mm-hmm.
What does this say here, Andy? As a result, with a record number of funds going to BLM and BLMGNF, I don't know what that one is, Con Colors and others proceeded to buy several expensive homes. Last month, it was revealed that the extent of how many homes were bought and how much they cost were far greater than most realized. According to New York Magazine, this included a $6 million house that had not originally been disclosed in the initial report of $3.2 million in houses purchased in LA and Atlanta by BLM leaders. The 6,500 square foot, 7-bedroom house was purchased with Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation funds in October of 2020 by Diane Pascal. Shortly after, over $66 million came in from sponsors that September. Yeah, so she was just out here.
That's
blowing
embezzlement,
cash.
right? I mean, that's embezzlement.
That's what I thought. But
Yeah, that's embezzlement. Yeah,
but that's,
absolutely.
I mean,
that was happening.
no group is safe from that.
Yeah, 100%. Like I've seen plenty of instances of, like, for instance, like the Democratic Socialists of America. Like I've seen plenty of groups complain that the DSA gets the money for whatever local, profit or whatever need there is, and then when it's time to distribute the money,
Fall short.
It's so interesting how it all goes. It's how it's set up. The system is not set up to get money down to aid people. It's not set up for that.
So as an anarcho communist,
Yeah.
is that what you say?
Yeah.
What is the ideal setup? That we abolish capitalism, implement communism, get rid of the police? Or is there like a set of, like, these are the milestones we would have to hit before we're in that state of whatever that entails?
Well, I think that it definitely depends. I've got my own ideals and thoughts, and like we're talking about, there's no lack of imagination in the world.
Yeah, people get crazy. People can go far with any idea.
Very
and then
much so.
You're sitting there thinking, okay, we're kind of going off the rocker here.
Right. Then it gets really utopian or, darker. You know what I mean? But, I just personally think that if we changed a lot about how we operate in terms of economics, resources, and people, those are the main drivers of it. People and resources drive everything. That's one of the interesting things about communism, right? Is that in capitalism, people's labor is often exploited, right? And more often than not, people are not paid properly for the work that they do. I think that that's one of the things that I've seen a lot. We see about all these different high profile crimes. Everybody's vested in, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, and you see all these kinds of different things, right? But like if the light was shined on the real thieves, like it would be like wage theft, like these big corporations that are, not paying people appropriately. Just for instance, I saw a video, Burger King worker, right? And I know they're franchised, so it's all kind of different, you know what I mean? But Burger King worker, guy was working at Burger King for 27 years. Finally retires. For his retirement, they give him, it's like a tumbler and like a toothbrush or something, like a lanyard. And the guy was working there for 27 years, making somebody some decent money. Those penny profits at fast food restaurants add up, And as that's how it went. That's how he was treated. It was just that's just how it goes. You know what I mean? Hey, thank you. Yeah. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
It's just the appreciation aspect of the worker.
Oh yeah, the labor,
Yeah.
right? So labor is often exploited, but what people often forget is that without labor, you don't really have anything. And so I'm for, whether it's socialism or communism, I want people to be properly paid for their labor. You know what I mean? I don't want this, I personally agree with kind of the. Uh-oh, did I just break you guys' thing? I personally agree with men that I see out there where this idea of unskilled labor is this capitalist thing to pay people lower. You know what I mean? Because you may say somebody's an unskilled worker, but I know unskilled workers that are doing things that skilled workers would never touch or do, right? But like, let's just say it may be hazardous and they're not getting the hazard pay for it, or stuff like that, where I just want people to get paid appropriately. And then if people were paid appropriately, you have communities operating a lot better. You know what I mean? If you had people paid appropriately around here, I feel like Walmart would probably go away. And I'm exaggerating to a sense, right? Walmart's probably not going anywhere. You know what I mean? But people around here love to spend money locally. And so they would, if people around here were affluent enough to just spend all their money locally, it all stays around here.
But that key word being you have to be affluent enough.
To even have money to spend.
Well, yeah, and especially to spend money on local products because those are usually more expensive.
Big time. Big time.
So how do you balance that? If you're increasing everybody's wage, spending power goes down. Right? Because products are going to get more expensive. And then you're playing that cat and mouse game of, well, how do you pay people what they're worth, but also keep prices relatively low so people can actually afford them?
Well, then we move over into the profit motive of capitalism and businesses, right? Where socialism, it's tampered down, and communism, it's like practically, in a sense, like cut, where you're not allowed to make profits, right? But in this society, we've got corporations, these oil corporations, making record profits, and our gas is higher than ever. You know what I mean? And so much of that increase, it happened, I think, generally, like the gas really started going up right when everything started to kind of hit the fan in Ukraine, right? And energy things across the world just started to change, and energy prices across the world started to go up, and we've seen a lot of unrest because of that. But oh shoot, I lost my train of thought.
Balancing the capitalist aspect of profiteering.
If you reduce that profit motive, like I know that's like, oh my gosh, like a capitalist is going to have a heart attack at that thought, right? Or that word, or that statement. But there's got to be certain industries where there's no profit, in my view. Something that's been big on social media and in community building spaces is corporate landlords recently, right? Like there's a lot of people in Europe especially that are like a lot of politicians that are like railing against corporate landlords because those guys are just buying up all the apartments and then renting them out at way too high a price just to bleed people dry that are already having it hard with inflation as it is right now. You know what I mean? So there's no real, like, what purpose in society does that serve? I'm not, and I'm not going to say then we need to, that's the kind of the capitalist fear comes from, oh, well, if they start doing that to this, and if they make it so that way there's no longer any corporate landlords, or you can't own more than X amount of units, housing units, then they're going to come for this next thing too. Like, there should just be a few things in our lives where there's no profit motive. Food, healthcare, education, housing, and maybe if you add more, then you're getting real socialist and communist. I don't know, you know what I mean? But, I mean, I think that there's just a few things that there should not be any profit motive in. And other things outside of that, great. But in this country, right, I think I just saw a study that said that if we had universal health care in this country, that it would have saved 200,000 lives during the pandemic, right? Like, I'm a proponent of universal health care. Like, I'm a anti-Reagan guy, like, all the way. Like, he was we know he was against socialized medicine and everything. And so I don't, I see what happens in other countries, where, the complaint is, oh, well, you're going to wait longer for services and everything like that. But the concept of people don't go and get health services that they need because of money and the cost involved and or insurance and all that nonsense, that's real. Like, that happens with me. Like, I don't, I'm not just going to go and, if I get a headache or something like that, we're not going to just go in there. You know what I mean? You have to taper, you got to be smart about
Be
it.
selective.
Yeah. And, but like, when a woman's having a baby, right? Like, why is there any?
Google this, because it's crazy expensive. It's $20,000 to have a kid, to have a baby delivered.
And that's what you end up like just paying.
Outrageous.
Mm-hmm.
Just to have a child.
Yeah. And if you're in England, right, or a nationalized healthcare country, it's not even a discussion, right? You go and get the services and
18,865. I was close. What did I say? 20? Yeah.
You would have won on Price is Right.
How ridiculous is that?
I know. And then, I mean, this is the only country. Well, no, actually, that's wrong. This country has no paid maternity leave federally, right? There's so many other countries. I just saw that meme where there's so many countries with how many months of maternity leave. And
Jesus, the study found that California women giving birth were charged from $32.96 to $37,227 for an uncomplicated vaginal delivery, depending on which hospital they visited. For a C-section, women were billed between $8,312 and nearly $71,000. That's insane.
Crazy.
$71,000.
I don't, yeah. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, that seems broken. The healthcare system,
100%.
especially, it seems like it needs a serious overhaul. Somebody's got to do something.
I was hoping, you remember back. How old are you? Can I ask you?
I'm 24.
That's
so
what somebody said.
I
was watching one of your episodes, and you said that in one episode. And so I mean, but you were alive during Obama's years, and so I felt like we all thought that he was going to bring the public and the private option, which would have made some difference. And then, of course, it didn't happen. It was more just big shillery. You know what I mean? But that could have changed a lot. Because that's like that. I look at the German system where they got a public option and a private option. That way, there's a baseline of care in the country that everyone can expect, regardless of your socioeconomic status, as long as you can get to one of the care centers or hospitals and hoping it's a decent quality one. There's different care places going to have different qualities. That's just where we are in life. You know what I mean? But in this system, the public and private option, right? And then you have the private option where you can have something better if you're affluent enough to be able to afford that, right? Like, I think that's probably a decent medium between the political spectrums and the political thoughts of completely privatized medicine versus completely, socialized medicine. I feel like that's reasonable, having
A
both
good
options.
medium.
Yeah, and we didn't even get that, of course. So, um, but yeah, healthcare is one of those things that there should be no profit in that. There really shouldn't be. These big, insurance companies. I mean, like, there's gonna be anybody that's more right leaning. They're not gonna like it when I talk about Michael Moore and his movie Sicko. But that was a movie I saw years back, and it talked about a lot, and it was an eye opener for me because healthcare at that point in time wasn't like a realm on the political spectrum I had really jumped into, and then I saw that, and I was just like, wow, this is how we're doing it over here, and now with the pandemic having happened and everything, like, I think that it showed the racial disparity that exists with care, where you're more likely to get worse care the more melanated you are, because the more melanated you are, this is not a across the board 100% thing, but you're more often to be in a lower socioeconomic status. And so then you're more often to get lower quality care, And so if there was just that basic, universal basic level, you know what I mean, then people would be healthier and actually be able to work like they want us to in this country. You know what I mean? They want to work us like dogs, and they don't even care about our health. It's just crazy. It's just the country's got a lot of problems, but so much of our wealth is being stolen from us on a frequent basis. There's people that don't even notice it and just give away so much of their wealth by the decisions that they make, by the things that they buy. And it doesn't keep money in our communities, that's for sure. Money often gets shipped away unless you're in a place like this where buying local is important to a lot of people. Then you can bet that a lot of communities' monies, especially in metro centers, are getting shipped away.
Yeah, that's the name of the game. Is to the best product or to the cheapest product. That's where you're gonna find the wads of cash.
Mm-hmm.
And the quickest product, right? Amazon. Who can compete with that?
Right. Yep. They've taken over. I mean, it's been so interesting to see how the world has changed in the time of the pandemic. I mean, and I think that these guys that are Bezos and these the people that are making out based on people doing a lot more online shopping, they don't want that to change. They're stoked on it. I mean, we know how Bezos operates. He's going to try to continue. He's moving into, I think, the stuff, he's moving into the grocery stores like we were talking about. And I think they just launched one somewhere where you can actually you can go in and just put what you want in your basket and walk out with it. And the whole system, it's all tracked. I was watching some news segment on it where it's like this AI that like creates a stick figure for your body while you're in the store, and it travels and sees what you're picking up, and and then figures out what you took and charges your account, and there you go. And that's the future of things. You know what I mean?
It is the future. I think Bezos stepped down from all that. Isn't he just focused on Blue Origin now?
You may be right.
He's just out here balling.
Yeah.
He's out here just. He's got so much money. He doesn't need to focus on that anymore.
Yeah, he's got good guys
He's
working
trying
for
to
him that are continuing his vision.
Go to space.
Yeah.
What is just walk out shopping? Oh yeah. Well, that all ties back into everybody's fear of a social currency where they can just track you, and that surveillance state where everything you see and everything you do is now monitored.
100%.
In some ways, that just walk-in shopping, that's the first step, is we're just going to watch you in the store and monitor your purchases through your account. And then eventually it's going to be, and then when you walk into another store, and then just all the time.
And they've got everything. Yeah, I mean, with that too, with the big news that came out of that was something that scared me as a technology guy that kind of keeps an eye on like this kind of stuff, you know. But um, Amazon was talking about the the palm reader technology that they are working to implement in those just walk out stores. It's taking your palm print and then putting it in the cloud. Now that's a whole new level because yeah, we've got these phones where they've got the thumbprint and everything like that. So if you put your thumbprints in it, then those thumbprints are out there. You know, I mean, only Samsung or Apple or Google maybe are supposed to have them and everything like that. But that's data.
Yeah, but do they really? Is it
Right.
really just them?
Right. Exactly. There with that data, it's supposed to be on your phone. Does not get like shipped to the sent to the cloud, right? But this Amazon thing, that was the thing about this that had a lot of privacy people all up in arms. Was this was the first time where they're talking about taking your biometric data and putting it in the cloud. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I get like notices of like your information's been breached, or I get those kinds of notices like all the time, like probably once a month. It's that bad in this personal data driven world, you know what I mean? And so
Google that. Google how many security breaches there are in a month. It's a lot. People don't understand. If you put something on your phone and it goes to the cloud especially, it's fair game.
Oh, 100%.
It's fair game.
Yeah.
Just because you think that you have this secured by your little password, it's not.
No.
And
no,
if
not
somebody
at all.
wants access, they're getting access.
Yeah.
And then, have you seen those videos where they hack Teslas and drive Teslas? I don't know if it was Tesla, maybe
There's
Mercedes,
the-
but they can hack your car.
I've seen it on the car I got as a Hyundai, and they've been. It's easy. I saw a video where you can just go on the web and get like it's technological, but like the private key